My name is Daniel Hart, and until the night everything burned, I thought I understood what it meant to be a good man. I had been faithful to my wife for 15 years. Not faithful in the shallow, technical sense of never got caught, but faithful in the way that matters when no one is watching. I turned away from temptation. I deleted flirtatious messages instead of answering them. I left bachelor parties early. I never let myself cross those invisible lines that people pretend don't count. I was proud of that. Maybe too proud. Her name is Lily. We met when we were 23, married at 28, and by 40, I had convinced myself that whatever storm life sent at me, marriage was the one thing that would hold. I was wrong. I work in IT security for a mid-size firm in Chicago, which means I spend my days telling people not to click on suspicious links and my nights shaking my head when they click on them anyway. That night, I heard Lily in the living room laughing. Not the small, polite laugh she used at dinner parties, but the real one. The laugh that came from her ribs. The one that used to erupt at 3 in the morning when we were still young and reckless, and everything was funny because we were alive. Then I heard the lower register respond. A man's voice, muffled, intimate. I froze. We don't have a landline. If Lily is talking to someone at home, she's either on a video call or on her cell. I stepped closer to the doorway, the mug of tea forgotten in my hand, and listened. "I swear, you are going to get me killed," she was saying, still laughing. The man's voice answered, softer now, the words a blur. Then I heard my name. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered in the sink. The clatter was loud enough that a normal conversation would have stopped, but the living room went abruptly silent in a different way. The way that comes when people realize they're not alone. I walked in. Lily was on the couch, legs curled under her, laptop open on the coffee table in front of her. She looked up at me like a teenager caught sneaking in after midnight. The screen was still glowing. I saw his face for precisely half a second. A man in his 30s, dark hair, a smirk that suggested he believed the entire world was backstage at his private show. The call cut off. The screen went dark. "Hey," she said too quickly. I remember every detail of that moment with ridiculous clarity. The gray of the couch fabric, the way the lamp was tilted just a bit too far to the left, the fine crack in the corner of her phone screen where she dropped it on the stairs last winter. All of it burned into me. But the words came out of my mouth flat and simple. She swallowed. Her throat moved. "Daniel, it's not what is his Derek," she said. It was the way she said from the gym that did it. Too fast, too practiced, like she'd been rehearsing an alibi long before I ever asked the question. I didn't yell, I didn't break anything. I just felt something inside me lean, like a beam under too much load. I asked. Her eyes flicked to the side, a reflex. When she brought them back to mine, they were full of something that wasn't guilt exactly. It was fear, or maybe fear of losing the comfort she'd built. "It's not what you think," she said, which is exactly the line every movie uses when it's exactly what you think. You learn, in the weeks after discovering your wife might be cheating, that your body has its own memory. I could sit at my desk at work, stare at lines of code, and still see that man's face on the laptop screen, frozen for a heartbeat before it went black. I went through the classics first. Denial. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was just flirting. Maybe they were just friends. Then the rationalizations. We've been distant. I've been working late. We've had sex less often. Maybe this is on me. Then the quiet bargain. If it's just emotional, I can forgive it. If it hasn't gone physical yet, we can fix it. That phase lasted a week. I am an IT security specialist. My job is literally to find out what people are doing on systems they shouldn't be touching. Trust is noble, but verification is my profession. So one night, when Lily was in the shower, I sat down at her laptop. I knew her password, my birthday. The irony burned. Her browser history was clean, suspiciously clean. Incognito mode then, or she was using apps on her phone. Her messaging apps were all logged out. Her email was boring. Shopping receipts, newsletter spam, PTA nonsense. Most people mess up their OPSEC somewhere. They forget one setting. They reuse one password. I waited until she fell asleep that night. Her breathing slow and even, the faint scent of her shampoo rising from the pillow, and then I took her phone. I knew her passcode too. I'd watched her type it in 1,000 times. It was all there. Their messages were in Signal, set to auto-delete every 24 hours. That would have been clever if she hadn't accidentally taken a screenshot of one particularly filthy exchange and saved it to her camera roll. I stared at that screenshot for a long time. It was a picture of a bed. Not ours. The sheets were dark. There was a man's arm in the corner of the frame, the curve of a shoulder, a chest. Her text under it read, "Still can't believe we did this." I don't remember lying back down. I don't remember putting the phone back. I just remember staring at the ceiling in the dark, hearing her breathe next to me, and feeling like I was lying beside a stranger who had skinned my wife and climbed into her life. When I confronted her with the screenshot, she didn't deny it. That almost hurt more than if she'd lied. I asked, "Dan, how?" "Many. 3, she said. 4, I don't know." "Things don't just happen," I said. "You drive to a place, you take off your clothes, you climb into a bed." "I didn't plan it," she said, voice rising. "I didn't go looking for it." That was the sentence that hollowed me out. I had spent 15 years wanting her. Not flowers and chocolates wanting, but deep, daily wanting. Wanting her when she was exhausted, when she was grumpy, when she was sick, when she was quiet and when she was loud. Wanting the whole person. And somewhere along the line, my wanting had become invisible. She cried. I didn't. Something in me had frozen solid. I listened to her talk about loneliness, about how I'd pulled away into work, about how she felt like a roommate. I heard all of it as if it were coming from the next room. I don't doubt the truth of some of it, but it felt like a justification built after the fact. An essay she'd written to explain a decision her body had made without consulting her ethics. I asked. She didn't answer right away. "I don't know what I feel," she said. "Alive," I repeated, as though the word were an exotic dish I hadn't tried. She opened her mouth and closed it again. That was answer enough. I didn't move out. I didn't throw her out. I should have, maybe. Instead, I lived in the same house with her and with the absence of something I hadn't known was gone until it was too late. But while the part of me that loved her tried to figure out whether anything could be salvaged, another part of me, the part that tracks access logs and traces IP addresses, started working on a different problem. Who the hell was Derek? Jealousy isn't one emotion. It's a whole stack of them, layered like sediment. Fear, anger, humiliation, curiosity. But I wanted his face. I wanted to know who he was so that when I woke at 3 in the morning with my heart racing, I had something concrete to aim my hatred at. Finding him turned out to be embarrassingly easy. She had his name in her contacts as Derek Jim, which, in hindsight, was almost insultingly lazy. People hide their affair partners under plumber or dentist or some other plausible deniability. She just slapped parentheses on his name like that turned him into harmless background. I took his number. I ran it through a couple of databases I'm not technically supposed to have access to outside of work. His full name popped up. Derek Mason, age 33, personal trainer, a few minor traffic violations. an Instagram account full of gym selfies and motivational quotes hacked from other people's accounts. He worked at the same gym where Lily had started going 6 months ago. She'd been excited about it. "They have a new trainer there," she'd said. "He really knows his stuff." At the time, I had smiled and told her I was proud of her. Now, that memory tasted like metal in my mouth. I went to the gym. I told myself it was reconnaissance, that I needed to see him, to understand what he had that I didn't. Maybe, I thought in some stupid corner of my mind that if I saw him and found him lacking, it would make this hurt less. He was exactly what I expected. Lean, tattooed, handsome, in that way that photographs well on social media. Confident, too comfortable in his own skin. I watched him from the second-floor treadmills, pretending to scroll my phone while he stretched out some young woman on the mat, hands on her hips, his laugh easy and familiar. It made my skin crawl. I walked out of the gym, shaking, the air outside colder than it should have been for May. That's when the idea came. I can't even blame some dark, foreign part of me. The thought came in my own voice, clean, logical, precise. If I wanted to know who he really was, if I wanted to know which man had been inside my wife, there was one guaranteed way to find out. I could make sure that whatever he and Lily did together came with a unique, undeniable marker. It's ugly, seeing that sentence written down inside my own head. It's uglier knowing that I followed through. The plan began as a bitter joke, I told myself on the drive home. "Fill the lube with pepper," I muttered under my breath at a red light. I laughed once. Just once. A short, ugly sound. But the thought didn't leave. It circled, it sharpened. I'm a man who understands chemicals and cause and effect. Capsaicin, the active component in chili peppers, is oil-soluble and ferociously irritating to mucous membranes and thin skin. I knew that from a first-year chemistry class and a lifetime of liking spicy food. It took 30 seconds on my phone to confirm the details. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I knew that if I mixed capsaicin extract with a neutral carrier and introduced it into a water-based lubricant in the right concentration, the result would be clear, invisible to casual inspection, and agonizing when applied to certain parts of the anatomy. I knew it as a fact, and I let that fact sit in the same room with my humiliation and my anger. Plans grow in the dark. I waited a week. During that week, Lily and I existed around each other like two magnets held just far enough apart that their fields never quite aligned. We talked about groceries, about bills, about the kids' school projects. We have two, Ethan, 12, Mia, 9. We did not talk about Derek. She told me she had ended it. She said it with the brittle conviction of someone who was trying to convince herself as much as me. I didn't believe her. That might not be fair, but trust isn't some switch you flick back on because someone promises to be good. The second piece of the puzzle fell into place on a Thursday night when I went to get a glass of water and saw a small bottle sticking out of the bedside drawer on her side of the bed. We hadn't used lubricant in months. We hadn't needed it, and then we hadn't been doing anything that required it. So I noticed it. A clear, brand-name bottle. Half full. A thought slid down my spine. I didn't touch it, not then. I closed the drawer quietly and went back to bed, lay down next to her sleeping body, and stared at the ceiling while my mind ran simulations. What if I doctored it and she never used it again? Then nothing would happen. What if I doctored it and she used it with me? That thought landed like a fist in my gut. I couldn't quite articulate why, but I knew I didn't have to worry about that. There was no version of the near future where we were reaching for that bottle together. No, if that bottle got used, it would be with him. I swallowed hard. The line was there in front of me, bright and unmistakable. I stepped over it. Buying pure capsaicin extract is disturbingly easy. You don't even need to go somewhere shady. There are hot sauce hobbyist sites that sell concentrates that are essentially weaponized chili oil. I found a brand that people use to make their own sauces. The reviews were full of all-caps warnings and stories from idiots who hadn't worn gloves. I wore gloves. In my garage, with the door closed, under the bright overhead light, I mixed a tiny amount of the oil into a neutral carrier, fractionated coconut oil, the kind sold in the health aisle. I wore safety goggles. I worked like a chemist instead of a lunatic. I tested a minuscule dot of the mixture on the inside of my wrist. Within 30 seconds, it felt like I'd pressed it to a stove burner. I washed it off under cold water, cursing, watching the skin redden and throb. Too strong. I diluted it further. On the second test, it burned like a very bad sunburn. That was enough. I sat there with the little dropper bottle in my hand, my wrist still tingling, my heart thudding. There was still time to stop. I could pour it down the drain. I could throw the gloves in the trash and never speak of it again. I could go upstairs and tell Lily about the plan that had formed in my head and let the horror in her face remind me I wasn't that man. Instead, I waited until Sunday afternoon. Sunday was our family day. We went to the park, we ate ice cream. We watched a movie. Lily laughed with the kids, and I had to keep reminding myself that she was also the person who had lain in another man's bed and texted him that she could still feel him. That night, after putting the kids to bed, we brushed our teeth side by side. Our reflections looked like a parody of a normal couple. She kissed my cheek and said, "I'm going to read for a bit," and climbed into bed with a novel. I sat at my desk and pretended to check email until I heard her breathing change. The book slipped from her hand, face down on her chest. I waited another 20 minutes just to be sure. Then I went to her side of the bed, opened the drawer, and took out the bottle. My hands were steady. That scared me more than if they'd been shaking. I unscrewed the cap, drew up a small amount of the mixture into the dropper, and released it into the bottle. Then I shook it gently, watching the tiny bubbles rise and disappear. The lubricant looked exactly as it had before. Clear. Harmless. I put it back. I closed the drawer, I went to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. There he was. A man who had always prided himself on being decent, on taking the high road, on believing that character is what you do when no one is watching. And there, on his face, was an expression I had never seen on myself before. If you are waiting for some pang of conscience that stopped me, you will be disappointed. The pangs came later. In the moment, all I felt was a grim, surgical focus. I told myself I wasn't trying to permanently harm anyone. I told myself it was just pain, temporary, the kind that emergency rooms see when some idiot handles chili peppers and then uses the bathroom. I told myself this was evidence, a marker, a way to know. It took 4 days, 4 days of acting normal, 4 days of pretending I didn't flinch when Lily's phone lit up, 4 days of wondering whether she had really ended it and whether I had just poisoned an object that would sit inert in a drawer until we moved house and threw it out. Then, on the 5th day, the universe cashed the check I had written. It was a text message from Marcus, our neighbor and one of my oldest friends. You hear paramedics outside. You look. M. Dude, you seeing this? Jared lived 3 houses down, in one of those slightly too big, open-plan houses with glass everywhere and a grill that cost more than my first car. He was also the sort of guy who, in retrospect, had always seemed a little too interested in my wife. At first, I thought Marcus had mistyped. Then came the next message. Actually, 2 ambulances. Crazy. I went. The night was cool, the sky over our suburban street a washed-out navy reflecting the city's glow. Red and blue lights pulsed silently against the houses. 2 ambulances. One in front of our place, one in front of Jared's. For a second, pure ice shot through me. Both? What? Then I heard a sound I will never forget as long as I live. It was a high, raw, animal scream from inside our house. Lily, I ran back in, heart detonating in my chest. The living room was chaos. One paramedic was at the door to our bedroom, talking fast into a radio. Another was coming down the hall from the direction of the bathroom, shaking his head. Lily was on the floor just inside our bedroom, curled on her side, clutching herself, sobbing. "It burns," she kept saying. My stomach lurched. I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly what I had done. But there was another detail my panicking brain almost missed. She pointed weakly toward the sliding glass door that led out to the yard. "Outside," she gasped. "At the neighbors. He... The paramedic didn't let her finish. So that was how the world told me, all at once, that Derek was not some distant Jim story. He was here. He had been here. Recently enough to be burning in synchronization with my wife. I stood there, rooted, watching strangers in uniforms do what I should have done. Which is to say, help her. They took both of them away. Lily went on one stretcher, pale, crying, trying to answer medical questions between gasps. I didn't see Derek, but Marcus later would tell me he'd seen him being half carried out of Jared's back deck gate, bare-chested, doubled over, swearing so loudly the whole block heard. The details blurred. There were questions from the paramedics. Any allergies? Any new products? Lily hesitated. Her eyes flicked to me. "Lube," she whispered. The paramedic nodded, professional. "Brand?" She named it. My throat tightened. He asked, meaning, "Was this a shared bottle?" She shook her head violently. "No. Just us." He didn't know how loaded that was. They loaded her into the ambulance. The doors closed. Marcus stood next to me on the lawn, barefoot, wearing pajama pants and a hoodie. He watched the lights swirl and fade as the ambulances pulled away. He asked. For a second, I almost told him everything. Right there on the grass, under the indifferent street lamp, I almost poured it all out. "I don't know," I said instead, and it tasted like vinegar. He clapped my shoulder. "Go after her, man. The kids." Our kids had slept through most of it, blessedly unaware. Before I left, I stood in their doorways, looking at their faces in the soft glow of nightlights. Innocent, trusting, living in a house that now sat on top of a mine I had laid. Then I went to the hospital. They wouldn't let me into the exam room at first. I sat in the waiting area, surrounded by people whose nights had gone suddenly and violently wrong for reasons that had nothing to do with my stupidity. A kid with a broken arm. An older man wheezing into a paper bag. I watched the fluorescent lights hum. Finally, a doctor in scrubs came out and called my name. "You're Mrs. I'm Dr. Yoon," she said. Her expression was professionally neutral. "Your wife is stable. She has significant chemical irritation to the genital and perineal area. We've flushed the area thoroughly and given her pain management. The good news is there's no systemic reaction. It's localized." I nodded, my throat thick. I asked, hating myself for the question. The doctor's eyes flicked to my face, as if weighing how much to say. She mentioned using a personal lubricant, Dr. Yoon said. We took a sample from the bottle she brought in. Lab's going to run a basic panel, but if I had to guess, I'd say some sort of capsaicin or similar irritant was introduced. Either contamination or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I asked. "She's sedated," the doctor said gently. "But yes. Seeing someone you've intentionally hurt lying in a hospital bed is not cathartic." There was no righteous glow, no sense of justice served. There was just a white sheet, an IV line, a monitor quietly beeping, and my wife, eyes half-lidded, face damp with the residue of tears and sweat. Her hand lay on top of the blanket, palm up. I stood there, looking at it for a long time before reaching out and taking it. She stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused, then sharpened. "Danny," she whispered. The way she said my name punched through every layer of anger and landed somewhere close to the boy I'd been when I first heard her laugh across a crowded dorm room. She asked. It was 4 words, but they contained an entire universe of meaning. I should have told her the truth right there. It would have been the most honest moment of our marriage. Instead, I said, "The doctors think the lube was contaminated." Her eyes filled. "It hurt so much," she whispered. "I know," I said. And I did. I'd felt a fraction of it on my wrist. She'd felt it where skin is thinnest, nerves closest to the surface. She squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm sorry," she murmured, words slurring as the medication pulled her under again. I stood there watching her breathe, listening to the monitors, and felt like the walls were closing in. I found out about Derek from gossip before I got any official word. Hospitals are leaky ships when it comes to stories. A friend of a nurse who knows someone at the front desk. By the next afternoon, Marcus had the headlines for me via text. "Bro, you're not going to believe this. Some guy came into the ER same night as Lily. Same, problem." I stared. "No," I typed. "Yep," came the reply. "That trainer dude, Derek. They say he was at Jared's place when it happened." I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. So that was it. My crude little marker had done its job. Out of all the men in the city, the only 2 who turned up in the ER with matching chili burn in the most intimate place were my wife and the guy she swore she'd ended things with. It should have been satisfying in a bitter way. Instead, I felt sick, because there was a 3rd layer I hadn't considered. The cops. They showed up at the house 2 days later. I was in the kitchen trying to figure out what bland food might feel less like fire for Lily to eat when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands and opened it. 2 officers. 1 male, 1 female. Plain clothes, badges clipped to belts. "Mr. the woman asked. "I'm Detective Lang. This is Detective Ruiz," she said. My pulse jumped. Of course. We sat at the dining table. The kids were at school. Lily was in the bedroom, dozing. "We have 2 ER reports," Lang said, opening a folder. "Same night, same time frame, same symptoms. Both patients said they'd used the same brand of personal lubricant prior to the onset of pain. Both were in this neighborhood. Did you know that, Mr. I knew my wife was taken to the ER," I said carefully. "Your wife didn't mention that she was not alone at the time," Ruiz said. "But that came out in the triage notes. Did you know she was with Mr. There it was. Clean, clinical." She told me later, I said. Lang asked, changing tack. "This is a house," I said. "We have bleach, detergent, motor oil in the garage. Anything like pepper spray?" My heart lurched. I forced a frown. Lang's eyes didn't leave my face. More concentrated. "We have reason to believe that the substance involved was capsaicin-based. It's possible this was a manufacturing defect in the lubricant." I let a beat pass, as if I were processing a new and horrible thought instead of wrestling down the urge to confess everything just to make the wait stop. I asked softly. "It's a possibility we're looking into," Ruiz said. "We're asking both households the same questions. Do you mind if we look around?" They had no warrant. I could have said no. I said yes, because I had thrown away the bottle and the dropper and the gloves 2 days ago in a dumpster behind my office far enough away that normal trash pickup would erase the trail. I'd thought that cleanup made me cautious. Now, it just made me feel calculating. They walked through the house. They glanced at the bathroom cabinet, at the cleaning supplies under the sink, at the garage shelves. Lang's eyes snagged on the empty space where a small box had sat in the trash can. She knelt, looked at the imprint on the plastic bag, faint but readable. "Hot pepper extract," she read. She turned to me. "You into spicy food, Mr.?" "A bit," I said. "I ordered some stupidly hot stuff a while back, tried it once." "That much was true?" she asked. "Last week," I said, heart stuttering. "It was just sitting there." She nodded slowly. She wrote something down. She asked, and that question told me she had seen burns from far too many kinds of idiocy. "On a cracker," I said, "in my mouth." A corner of her mouth twitched. "They left without cuffing me. They left without taking anything." When the door closed, I leaned my forehead against it and exhaled shakily. I had set a fire. The fact that I wasn't yet burned didn't mean the flames weren't spreading. The neighborhood gossip did the rest. Within a week, everyone knew that Lily had had an accident, and that Derek, the young trainer from the gym, had had the same accident at Jared's house. No one said the word affair out loud, but it hung in the air like smoke. Jared stopped making eye contact at the mailbox. Marcus invited me for beers more often, but there was a new caution in his questions. He'd ask, and I'd say, "Yeah," and we'd both know that was a lie. Lily moved through all of this like a woman inside a glass bottle. She flinched when she sat down. She slept on her side with a pillow between her knees. She started therapy. She stopped going to the gym. We didn't talk about Derek. Then, one night, we finally did. It was late. The kids were in bed, the house quiet. Lily sat at the dining table with a cup of tea she didn't drink. I walked in, intending to go straight upstairs, but she spoke my name. I stopped. "I ended it," she said. "With him, for real. I told him at the hospital, before they took me in." "Magnanimous of you," I said, more acid in my tone than I'd planned. She flinched. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," she said. I waited. She asked quietly. The question landed between us like a live wire. For a second, the easy answer flashed across my mind. No, of course not. Must have been a factory issue. Then another thought followed close behind. If I lied now, I would be constructing a whole second betrayal on top of the first. I would be cementing myself into the role of the man I despised. I would be making it impossible for either of us to ever truly climb out of this hole. But if I told the truth, I might lose everything. Not just her, the kids, my job, my reputation, maybe my freedom, if the detectives decided intent was enough. I sat down opposite her. "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes. 2 tears slipped out, cutting clean tracks down her cheeks. She asked, though I think she already knew. "I wanted to know," I said, "who it was. If it was still going on, I wanted, I don't even know. Revenge, control, evidence, all of it. I mixed capsaicin into the bottle. I told myself it would just make it obvious. That it was just pain. You could have killed someone," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, I checked. I researched. It's cruel, yes, but it's not deadly. At worst, it's what you experienced. What he experienced. Intense pain." Her eyes flashed. "No," I said. We sat there in silence for a long moment. "You hurt me," she said finally. "You hurt me first," I said, and as soon as the words were out, they sounded like something a child would say on a playground. "I know," she said, "but I didn't set out to. I was selfish. I was stupid. I wanted to feel wanted." She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. "You planned it," she said. "You ordered something. You mixed it. You waited for me to sleep. You went into my drawer. You changed something you knew I might use on my own body." "I did," I said. She asked. That was the sharpest blade. I thought about it because if I lied, I owed myself at least the courtesy of knowing I was lying. "I thought it would tell me if it was still him," I said carefully. I met her eyes. "I don't know," I said at last. And that was the most honest answer I had. She looked away, wiped her face. "I slept with your best friend," she said. The words hit me like a chair to the chest. She laughed once, a jagged sound. "Not Derek. That was... I don't even know what that was, but before him. A year ago, once with Jared." The room seemed to tilt. It took a moment for the implications to drop neatly into place. Jared's odd guilt, his over-friendly small talk, the way Lily never quite met his wife's eyes at block parties. "I wasn't planning to tell you," she said. "I told myself it was a mistake I'd never repeat, that it was a drunken, stupid thing. And then Derek happened, and I realized the problem wasn't them. It was me." I sat there, feeling like someone had swapped my life with a stranger's soap opera. "So," I said slowly, "you betrayed me twice, and I committed assault on you and on the second guy." "Pretty much," she said. Another tear slid down. We both laughed then. It was wild, exhausted, almost hysterical. She asked quietly, when the laughter died, "Did I? Did love survive this much corrosion? Or was what I felt now something else entirely? A bonded mixture of history and habit and guilt and bruised fondness?" "I don't know," I said. "I love who we were." She swallowed. She asked, "Could I? Maybe." People have forgiven worse, but the more pressing question thudded in my chest. I asked back, for what I did. She looked at me for a long time. "I don't know," she said. "I thought I knew you. I thought I could predict what you would and would not do. That made two of us." The detectives called again a week later to say the lubricant manufacturer had tested their batch and found no contamination at production. They asked if anything had gone missing from our house. They asked if we'd had any work done recently. Plumbers, electricians, anyone who might have had access to the bedroom. I gave non-committal answers and hung up with my pulse pounding. They had nothing concrete. I had covered my tracks too well. If they did decide to pursue it, they'd have a circumstantial case and two very embarrassed victims who would prefer this never see a courtroom. The legal consequences fizzled. The personal ones did not. We didn't divorce. Not right away. People assume that's the inevitable end of stories like this, but real life is messier. There were kids and mortgages and shared history and mundane comforts tangled up with the betrayal and the anger. Instead, we existed in a sort of limbo. Therapy, individually, together. Schedules, boundaries, honesty, or at least an attempt at it. We told each other more truths than we ever had in 15 years. She talked about the loneliness that had crept into our marriage like fog, how she'd interpreted my focus on work as rejection rather than misguided devotion. I talked about the quiet resentments I'd never voiced, the times I felt taken for granted, the way I'd slowly stopped sharing parts of my inner life with her because I felt unheard. Somewhere in the middle of those difficult conversations was the moment I had to describe, out loud, how I'd gone into her drawer at night and poured pain into something she trusted. That was the worst. "I wanted you to hurt," I said, one day in the therapist's office, voice barely above a whisper. "Not because you deserved it." There it was, the ugliest, simplest truth. "I thought if you felt something that intense, it would reset us," I added lamely. The therapist asked, "Yes and no. It certainly reset something." After the burns, after the hospital, after the cops and the gossip, there was no going back to the version of our marriage where we both pretended things were mostly fine. The house was full of broken crockery we'd both been willing to ignore. But reset isn't the same as repair. It's been 2 years now. We are still married, technically. We live in the same house, we co-parent. Some days it feels almost normal. Other days I catch sight of a small bottle of moisturizer on the bedside table, and my whole body clenches. We don't use lube anymore. We don't use any products we haven't both bought together, laughing nervously in the store like teenagers. Trust is a funny thing. It doesn't just rebuild in a straight line, it comes back in fits and starts, in tiny, unglamorous acts. She tells me when she feels attracted to someone else instead of hiding it. I tell her when I'm angry instead of swallowing it until it ferments. We haven't had sex as often as before. When we do, there's a carefulness to it that is both tender and sad. Sometimes, in the middle of it, I catch a flicker of fear in her eyes, not of me physically, but of the possibility that harm can come from the person you share your bed with. That's a look I put there. I live with that. If you're waiting for a moral, I'm not sure I have a clean one. I can tell you this much. Revenge did not feel like justice. It felt like lighting a match in a room full of gas and then being surprised when everyone, including me, started choking. I thought, in some half-articulated part of my mind, that making him hurt would balance the scales. I thought that discovering, beyond doubt, who she was with would give me some solid ground to stand on. Instead, I got confirmation of something I already knew and added a brand new layer of harm on top. When I close my eyes at night, sometimes I see her in that hospital bed, whispering my name. And I have to remind myself that I did that. Not Derek. Not fate. Me. I was faithful for 15 years. I took pride in not stepping outside my vows. But the moment I decided that her betrayal freed me from my own ethics, I became unfaithful in a different way, to myself. In the end, the worst burn wasn't on skin. It was on character. That's the part no ER can flush clean.